Pilgrimage of Grace 1536. So this is another of the events that you need to know about in terms of power in the people. And this one, the major cause was religion. It's not just that though, you've also got to think about other things that were going on. So Anne Boleyn and Henry VIII had got married, so in order for that to happen, Henry VIII had done the English Reformation. So he changed the religion of the country from Catholic to Protestant. Now he started the dissolution of the monasteries earlier than 1536, he started around 1534 when he was married to Anne Boleyn, but by this point when the Pilgrimage of Grace is happening, Anne Boleyn's already been beheaded. So in terms of it, what had happened is people were very, very unhappy, especially in the north, because they still wanted to be Catholics. And also they were unhappy that things like, the silver and the gold plate and the gold crucifixes and the lead from the roofs and things were being taken from the monasteries. Because the monasteries had basically been like hospitals, they'd given out, sort of charity to the poor, they'd helped educate some, children. So they were really, really important, the monasteries, for different areas in England. So the problem that ended up happening in terms of the Pilgrimage of Grace then was it began in Lincolnshire because they were really unhappy that, the King's Guards were going to come and obviously start taking over the monasteries there. And the people blamed Cromwell, okay? So basically Cromwell was the chief advisor of King Henry VIII, and he showed him that if he dissolved the monasteries, he could become extremely rich. So what started to happen then is it spread to York, and the reason why it spread to York was because Robert Aske, a lawyer, had been going through Lincolnshire, and then he'd been caught up in the sort of rebellion there, and then he went back to York and he spread it there. So this is a rebellion in the north. And what Robert Aske wanted to do is he wanted to try and obviously, get the king, if he possibly could, to go towards, thinking about stopping the dissolution of the monasteries, making sure that he restored the Catholic faith and things. So this could have been the most serious rebellion yet. This could have been a really successful rebellion because 50,000 men from the north started to march towards London, started to march south. So what happened then is Robert Aske was prepared to obviously, be the leader of it, but he wanted it to be all about religion. So it was called the pilgrimage because that means it's a religious march, and they had to take a pilgrim's oath before they went. And also the march under the 5 wounds of Christ. So that obviously showed the whole thing was about religion. Now some people were a little bit annoyed about taxes and shortages of food, but ultimately the main driving force behind this protest and this rebellion was religion. So what did the rebels want then? Well, the rebels weren't just a group of peasants like in the Peasants' Revolt. These were gentry, these were lords. So this was really, really serious for Henry VIII, and he would have been concerned that 50,000 of these people were marching towards London. So the rebels demanded the following things. They said they didn't want anybody who was involved in the Pilgrimage of Grace to get any repercussions for that, just like we said in terms of the Peasants' Revolt. They wanted them to restore the Catholic faith. They wanted to get rid of people like Cromwell, and they wanted to absolutely stop the dissolution of the monasteries. And unfortunately at this point for Henry VIII, his reputation had been a little bit ruined because of everything that had happened in terms of Anne Boleyn, that he'd had to, have her executed and things for adultery. We know that she didn't actually do that, but things like that. And obviously people hadn't been happy, a lot of people, with the English Reformation. So Henry VIII got his advisors to agree to these demands, okay? So basically he was like, that's fine, I'll agree to these sorts of demands. And all these things like, a pardon for all and stopping the dissolution of the monasteries, and also having, a parliament at York so they could discuss things in the north and it's not just all about what's said in London. It looked like Robert Aske had had some sort of major victory here. But then it goes horribly wrong, really. Because the king goes completely back on his word. And he's asked Robert Aske to come to the palace, to spend Christmas with him. And Robert Aske can't really refuse this because that would be seen as really disrespectful to the king. So what happens is he does go there and everything, and then the king accuses them of going back on the word, and the pilgrims haven't done what they said. And suddenly Robert Aske finds that he's then hung from the gates of York, and it takes him 3 days to die. And then 216 people to start with are killed because of the Pilgrimage of Grace, so they're killed in York. But then more follow after that, because Henry VIII wants to send out the message that basically he cannot be forced to do what people want him to do. He is the King of England. So this is sad really, because actually Robert Aske until then had been a pretty good leader. But the problem was he trusted the king. And then he disbanded the 50,000 men, so nobody then really had, you know, a knife to the throat of Henry saying you have to do these things, because there wasn't actually the 50,000 men there together to be able to do anything. And in terms of significance, it really is significant because it could have been the most successful rebellion that they'd ever seen in terms of against a king. But instead, Henry VIII had had all these people murdered, so he was then, you know, more feared than he ever had been before. He didn't restore the Catholic faith. The English Reformation continued. Cromwell continued as well in terms of being his chief advisor, although he did have a little bit of an issue with Cromwell after this. So this was sort of the beginning of the end for Cromwell. I think that would be fair to say that. Also, he sped up the dissolution of the monasteries, which is exactly what the Pilgrims hadn't wanted. And he also showed the dangers of trusting a king, because Robert Aske had taken him at his word, okay, and got him to agree to all these things, but actually Henry VIII had no intention of doing that. So in the end, although this is all about religion, and you know, you obviously wanted to stop the dissolution of the monasteries, this did continue, and Henry VIII just got richer and richer and richer, because when he continued to dissolve the monasteries, that's exactly what would happen. So the uprising from the north could have been successful, but unfortunately the Pilgrimage of Grace ended up being a disaster for those people who were involved.